thank you for those that are staying on mute, recognizing that the background can somewhat be loud.
Very much appreciated. Well, while you all take a moment to interact with this poll and we have an idea of who's with us, I'll just go ahead and start to tell you that I'm going to go raspy in and out of this. There's no need for you to worry. It's just something that I have to live with for the rest of my life. But no concern, health and wellness is good.
All right, we're about to close the poll. We'll get moving. We know that we have some culinary, some pastry, some personal chefs, some are development, coming from the manufacturing background. That's exciting. We spend a lot of time in the manufacturing world. And everybody seems to have very positive mindsets as far as, you know, the day-to-day change. Everybody is having little change, no change. Some of it is adjusting as necessary. And then as far as what we're seeing, as far as what is being practiced in kitchens, we're vegetable fermentation, meat fermentation, bread, even some preventative maintenance for tool sharpening. Jeff is actually the instructor who taught me how to sharpen a knife. And I still, to this day, have my own stones and use that as my alone meditation time. All right, we'll get into this. Well, thank you all for being here. This is really fantastic, very exciting. Ironically, we started out with just a general conversation. Jesse and Walt introduced us to Greg, and we just kept chatting, and said, you know what, let's put some action behind this and get this going. So thank you. Thank you very much. Now, we're going to go into the introduction, and Greg, I'm going to pass this off to you, Mr. Strawberry Fields, and then I'll let you pass it off to everybody else.
Yeah, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. It is a pleasure to be partnered up with Control Point from the Colorado Chefs Association, a chapter of the American Culinary Federation. Our mission, obviously, is to foster professional growth through education, bring about professional culinary interaction, facilitate the sharing of opportunity, and represent and elevate the culinary arts. And I believe that this webinar is doing just that during this this time in our COVID industry, in our industry. I mean, during the uncharted waters that we've never been in together. So I just want to say thanks, everybody, for being here. Thank you to all the panelists. We're going to go through those really quick. Thank you. A special shout out to you, Trev, Chef, you, as an adventure racer, and the weird way that we met. We hit it off great, and I just can't thank you enough from the Culinary Colorado Chefs Association, and just personally, thank you very much. And thank you to your company and all the time you put into this. I'm going to pass it over to Walt. Chef Walt Hawley, introduce yourself, and the mic is yours.
Greetings, everybody. I'm still looking at Greg, so I think I'm on.
You're on.
Good. My name is Walt Hawley. I'm a certified executive chef. Been a part of the Colorado chapter since 1986. I'm a chef instructor of the apprenticeship program here in Denver, teaching the first year students right now, which has been a blast. And I also own and run Rocky Mountain Food Partners, where we do food manufacturing and distribution coast to coast. I want to give a special shout out before introducing Chef Jeff Butler to Rebecca Wiedemer as our videographer from Golden Grove Global. She has worked tirelessly in conjunction with Trevor to bring us together with some super slides and some great video. So thanks, looking forward to a great hour. And then I want to introduce Chef Jeff Butler. Take it away.
Chef, you might be on. Nope. All right, you're not on mute.
How you doing? I'm Jeff Butler. As Trevor just mentioned a few minutes ago, I was his culinary instructor at the International Culinary Center in New York City. I have taught there for 13 years. I am a CIA grad and I've worked in Manhattan my entire career. Done quite a bit of charcuterie, and general education in culinary arts has been my main avenue and goal for the last bit of time. Started working with Trevor a little bit ago, basically in an advisory role in certain aspects of what he's been doing. And it's been interesting so far putting this meeting together with Walt and Greg. We've had a lot of ideas flowing back and forth, and it's great to hear the perspectives of Colorado and also how it's going differently out there versus how things are happening in New York. So thank you for having me.
Excellent. Now we want to, introduce you to some of the guests. We're going to get into a video later in the process, but this is very fascinating because we're getting really valuable insight from what is going on. And as Walt mentioned, Rebecca helped us put these videos together. That was, video editing is not my comfort level. Here. That's why. So it's really important. And then, for Aaron and Chef Jesse to be present through this, like we set up a, you can call it like a rehearsal, except we didn't dress up. We actually went through it step by step so we could try to mitigate any sort of technical difficulties along the way. So this is really exciting. You have a lot of information to see, and post panel discussion, you're going to have access to this. We'll get it up. We'll share it with everybody and let you know where you can find it. But it's this, just like anything else, quality in, quality out. So the more you are willing to put in, the more you can take away. Put those questions forward. We're going to go through a Q&A session, and it's going to be quite phenomenal. We are being cognizant of time frames. So the earlier you get your questions in, the more likely we'll be able to get to them. If there's any questions that we have not touched base on, that doesn't mean that we can't continue this conversation. We're already talking about our second, third, and fourth time we're going to be doing this. So I'll take a little bit more time to just tell you the perspective and the why. In food safety, in the culinary profession, it's important to see things from different areas, different levels, and have a different set of lenses that we look through. But our why is we, the hospitality industries, need to maintain ownership and be the source of valid data when legislators are involved. We aren't setting a bar, we are raising the boom with standards of excellence. If you think about that, bars have to have something to support them, and then they're secured, and then they have to be readjusted and moved, et cetera, et cetera. So we're doing something beyond that, but we want to be very, we want to work towards the positive relationships with the inspectors, because they are people too, whether it's local, state, or federal. It's important to understand that they're people. And, our objective for Control Point is to be the light in the vessel through times. Things get very challenging from time to time, regardless of what we're in right now. And so we use those things that we have learned and apply them where they are appropriate. But we're going to get into these. And Jeff, I'm going to call on you first. I got some really good questions. You're a veteran of this industry, but can you speak to the beginning of where we talk about getting together with teams and then the cultural side of things? Oh, you're on mute again. Sure. Yep. No.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, still navigating this whole Zoom thing. When Trevor and I first kind of hit this topic, the first thing that came to mind with it is everybody across the board in our kitchen scenarios, it's all about how we manage communication and trust. So our job ultimately is to serve a customer, whether it be in a situation where it's a retirement home or a country club or a restaurant, whatever it may be. It always boils down to our customer, and then our customer trusts us and the service staff, and the kitchen staff can then trust the service staff to be communicating correctly. And the purchasing portion of the kitchen is getting the information and is communicating well with who they are buying the items from. So all those parts of the chain have to be lots of trust involved. And it's become.
Chef, you went on mute again.
We're back?
Yep.
There we go. So once again, the key word here I'm telling you is trust, trust, trust. Everybody throughout the system has to be able to do that for everybody to feel comfortable and move everything forward.
Excellent. Now, can you describe the value of food safety and how it's evolved from your time at CIA through the highly acclaimed operations in New York City?
Well, it's changed a lot in the fact that, if you want to talk about in the trenches, every day working in communication, there was a lot more of when I walked out of school, complete yes, chef, complete just following like a drone because you were told to do certain things, you did it. You had to trust in your boss, trust that whoever's directing you was telling you the right things and you just followed blindly. As far as education is concerned, the students have changed a lot in the last 20 years compared to 25 years ago when I went to culinary school. Now the students are questioning why and how. They have more knowledge on hand for them to pick up information. So, an everyday practice, it all based on how that transparency goes along lines of what you're working with. As far as like in the trenches and how it all works together with communication is like the key part to it. The transparency and communication, the information that you're giving, not making them blindly follow you. You have to give them statistics, data, information they're expecting it to understand and get a full picture of what they're doing. And those expectations have to really follow down the line. Not only is it the people that are working for you in the front of the house, the back of the house, and in the kitchens, but the people that are working alongside and explaining the food and dealing with the food directly to your customers, they have to keep that level of communication up. They have to keep the level of expectations very clear, especially now, because if without that level of communication hitting the way we want to, it's going to create a lot of anxiety in our customer base. It's going to put them in a position where they're worried about what they're doing. They're worrying if they made a good choice or bad choice coming to your establishment. And that is very evident to me. I mean, it's in the purchases that I've made it food-wise recently, that's become part of my decision. If I felt stressed, I was definitely not going to come back. But, and given where we are in this world right now, where we're living, that's a huge part in it, and I definitely in the New York area has become a very big question. Am I going to trust the person who is bringing my food to me to have done the proper things, to wash their hands, et cetera, and so forth? So in the trenches, it's transparency is our biggest key.
Well said, and that's really important even from a manufacturing side. So I'd say that, the consequences of operating outside of compliance is we lose trust of our customers, which is unfortunate. But Walt, how would you describe the cost of food safety? You as an instructor, you as a operator, we were talking about your knowledge and experience in food manufacturing as well. How would you describe the cost of food safety?
Food safety, is the number one topic at every table around the country. And first of all, I don't think it doesn't have a cost. I think it's a stake in the ground to survival for every level of segment in the industry. I think you can have specific tangible costs when you think about PPE, personal protective equipment. I think that's got to be in place from day one, and I think it should be there for everyone, front of the house, back of the house, bartender, all the different people in appropriate PPE, and regular, consistent training. It can't be overstated. It can't be redundant, because the more people they hear it and the reasons why, and they're educated about why food safety at all different levels, they were able to offer a level of confidence back to the guest, back to the consumer, be able to be visible about that at all levels. It's going to bring back what we're talking about with the confidence of the diner, confidence of the consumer, and a level of trust as well to the server and the operator that's in the dining room or in the kitchen.
Thank you for that. Greg, calling on you now, how would you describe the validity of food safety?
You know, it's extremely valid. It's extremely important that operators are not cutting corners. I think we know based on Data Essentials, based on several surveys from news stations to just general polls, everybody is thinking about food safety. So it's hyper aware. Our patrons are hyper aware of safety and food safety and how they're all intertwined, and they're concerned about their own health. The deal is, this is real, and coronavirus can get people sick and can kill them. So we, as people that are entering these people's houses through packaging, or when they enter our establishments or have any kind of contact with us through delivery or pickup, our industry, I mean, we need to be aware of what they're putting into their bodies, into their cars, and how we might or might not and can prevent them and putting them at risk. So again, Walt, I love that you said training on staff, training on new sanitation and safety procedures. And like I said, when our industry gets back up and running, it's extremely important that we, as leaders in the industry, as people that are, we care enough to get on this call, and we care enough to be aware of this topic, to spread the news and be leaders and help other people develop those standard operating procedures that they don't backslip into any kind of old habit that they might have, because patrons are hyper aware of this. And again, you said, what's the cost of not doing it? The cost is it gets out there and patrons don't frequent their establishments anymore. That's the real cost of it. So putting those preventative measures in place is extremely important. I appreciate the question. Thank you, Trevor.
Oh, excellent. And I think that was an excellent timing. That was actually the next question I wanted to follow up and say, what is the cost of opposite? And we have this discussion with clients that come forward and sit down, and they say, well, how much does it cost? It's like, well, how are you willing to risk your entire cash flow? And if you are, then we do the pen and paper method, put something on paper and then make it disappear very quickly and say, you have to consider, you have to make sure that you're earning customer trust back. You have legal fees, marketing fees, you still have all of your utilities, lights, water, gas, etc. But we'll move forward. Excellent. I want to touch base. Yeah, thank you for my, I don't know how I made that scratch on the slides or why it's still present, but we'll use it for charades at the end of this call. Now, I wanted to touch base on these things here: withdrawal, recall, and outbreak. Now, Greg, you see this firsthand because of the information that US Food puts out. But what would you say is the best approach for people to stay informed about this, regardless of who their suppliers are?
Well, and speaking from just the people on this call, from the Colorado Chefs Association, from the perspective of a chef and an operator, undeclared allergens are the #1 recall, right? Cross-contaminants within manufacturing facilities. They might not always get the highest focus on romaine or something like a ground beef or spinach because they're so widely distributed. However, there's several recalls frequently on undeclared allergens. So that's a big one. But the question was, how do we as operators stay incommunicado with what those are and how those happen? So the benefit to buying from a trusted resource is going to be that the recall process and the communication lines are extremely strong. So it's traceability. It's FSQA from seed all the way down to operator. And then the FSQA people and systems that are in place, the infrastructure to get that information if there's a problem along that chain, along the cold chain, along the sourcing chain, all temperature control, whatever it is, all the way to the operator, and then it's a quick communicado all the way down to the person whoever's on that email for the communication. So the benefit would be not knowing your traceability of your food. So again, knowing your suppliers, having trusted resources, and having full transparency and traceability on what it is that you're bringing into your operation. And actually, this might be a good question to spin off to some of our panel people if you want a little more detail. But that's pretty much all I got on that.
Right on, and we will get into that. Now that we're mentioning these things, like what do we do during our current times, CV-19, coronavirus 19, COVID-19. I think it's important to say that we're specifically looking for things that we've received details either from one, a scientific journal, or two, from the places that actually publish these journals, like Columbia University. So we had a conference call with them yesterday morning to say, what do we need to look for? Fevers, aches and pains, tightness in the chest, and such as respiratory challenges. So those are the specific details. But
Trevor,
go ahead.
Trevor, too, the CDC guidelines have just changed too for the doctors for recognition. So that it's a constant moving target for a lot of people. And that's something everybody should be aware of. Now, I mean, not coming from medical background, but from talking to people that have had COVID over the past few weeks, I've had plenty of students and different people. Everybody is getting different symptoms, and it's not like a one-stop shop for everything. And it is something for people to be aware of when you have your employees and your staff coming in.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Ooh, now we're getting into some more data. We always love data, and I think that this is also a recap of what we disclosed earlier. And to put this in a better perspective, if you imagine a pyramid with 7 layers, the amount of time that it takes for one of these people to actually be noted, to be identified as being ill because of an outbreak or recall, etc., it takes 7 steps. It's quite a journey through that process. So when we're looking at data and numbers, we got to see that they're factual for us. But now, oops, these lovely technology things we're so getting used to. All right, now, Walt, or excuse me, Greg, I have something for you. This is kind of pre-video data, but thank you for this information, by the way. It's great because it gives us an idea of flow. So how we would set up a system or process. And what would you say is a highlight out of things like this and how we can apply it to our specific operations?
When I first showed you guys this slide, Jeff, you almost jumped out of your chair. You were like, I love that slide. So,
well, I mean, there's a reason, because it's trying to give you some clear guidance. I mean, there's a lot of people that are having issues with this right now.
So I think in the future, everybody, there's a lot of logistical planning that's going to go into contact-free or low-touch or however you want to call it, pickup and delivery. And what that looks like in the future might be a lockbox with a QR code on your phone. Everything's touch-free. But a lot of places are saying, hey, what parking spot are you parked in? And we've got a couple more flowcharts later on in the presentation. But what this really says is it needs to be planned out. When you have a plan, it's easier to change a plan. And I know, Trevor, in your business, Control Point, Jeff, you're in that same business. All of us in operations, we're logistical people. We need a checklist, and we like to say, here's the training manual, here's the checklist. So, hey, let's put this on the checklist, everybody. The flow of service and the sequence of service for delivery and pickup to keep it safe, right? So whether it's hash marks on the floor, whether it's a text message reminder that's GPSed into your mobile device, it's really important that we're thinking about things that are going to be different in our industry. And then the bigger part of that is, how are we socializing that? How are we getting that communication, that message out to our customers? So this is just a prelude, I feel, to what's going to be many many different logistical systems that each restaurant's going to have to develop on their own. That's probably going to work, but at least when you have a system, it's easier to change one or two pieces of it than it is to say, I don't have a plan. Yeah, it's touch free, and then you go deliver the food to the person's car and there's no mask. I mean, I know that's an extreme example, but it's something that people are aware of, and it's what people are talking about. That's the buzz in the coffee shops and on social media. Hey, did you know that the restaurant next door, I had to touch their handle to open the door? Well, the restaurant next door that I talked to this morning said, I'm propping my doors open because I heard that the people next door care about that. So when the restaurants are really trying and when they're focused on these issues, they're not going to become issues. We're going to work through all this together. It's going to be okay in the long run, I think is what I'm saying.
Well, Greg, to your point, that idea is really correct. Is people, the customer base is willing to accept these situations and these scenarios if they feel adjustments are being made. And also, even more so for the mom and pop shops that have been doing it for 30 years, if they are seen like they're trying to adapt and evolve and change, people are willing to, mistake an order, to accept that. They're to wait a little bit long, wait a lot longer than they typically would. So obviously in this business, all of it comes down to how you're taking care of your customers. But the places that have been keeping the customer base for years and years and years are the ones who will be most accepted easily and will hurdle it. It's the other places that are a lot less informed, less personal to them, that they're really going to scrutinize. The places that they don't feel a connection to, those are the ones that they're going to go after the most, I believe.
Excellent. This is great. And this is exactly why we wanted to set it up as this panel discussion to keep the conversations going. It's not scripted. We have an idea of what questions we're presented with, but encourage you, put your questions forward now, either privately or to everyone. And this is great. This is one of our first questions to come up. And I want to go ahead and just put it out there because our next slide was in regards to what we're going to see in the video or what we're going to have access to. And Chef DeGiovanni, besides CDC as guidance, what are you using to help you set your SOPs? And then we'll get into the second part of that question.
Well, thank you for having me, by the way. First of all, because of what we do as a company in senior living, the way we're set up, we already had a lot of policy and procedure in place for seasonal flus or those things that where we may get outbreak because of having a highly susceptible population. So having policies and procedures in place already is something that we had when we first started hearing about this. Before hearing what recommended guidelines were from CDC or other health agencies, WHO or whoever it may be, we started actually planning ahead for what we knew could happen if COVID entered our buildings. And so we started contacting local suppliers, local labs for PPE, for test kits. We were able to source and get testing kits out to all 26 of our communities in 9 different states. We were just, there's a lot of help out there when you start talking to your counterparts in the industry. Having something like the Colorado Chefs Association and members there to reach out to see what they're doing has been a great help. But a lot of it is just, planning for the worst, hoping for the best, but knowing that if a disease like this comes into one of our communities, thinking ahead, how are we going to do day-to-day operations, and what control point can we put in place every step of the way to prevent it from spreading even more than it could. And so we were way ahead of the game as far as the way we stopped communal dining and started having our residents eating in their rooms, or to begin with in smaller groups, limiting any access to the building from any non-essential people, and that includes, unfortunately, family members. The way we started receiving deliveries from our broadliners, as far as how somebody has to first come into the front of the building to be to have their temperature monitored, and also to fill out a questionnaire as far as where they may have traveled. And we did a lot of that in the beginning of the COVID because of travel guidelines that were out there, before they can then go around to the back and then actually deliver their product, and then how they can deliver it, as far as not coming into our kitchens, what we do with that product before we put it away, the whole the way we started ordering massive amounts of disposables at a company-wide level. So a lot of the things we did were company-wide all at once, and just started sending that out. So we took that off the plate of our individual chefs, so they wouldn't have to be worrying about sourcing disposables or any of those other things, for nursing, having to try and find PPE or test kits should they have suspected outbreaks going on. So yeah, there's a lot of organizations and information out there that you can access, but it's also, planning ahead and thinking ahead. It's not hard to see how some of these things are going to follow, right? Where we're talking about coming out of this fairly soon, but how we do that as a senior living community is going to be a little bit different than how restaurants and others in the food industry do that, just because of our population being highly susceptible and the extra steps that we have to take to contain and control things. And so, if anybody's a member of a GPO, like through US Foods, if you've got Premier Innovatics or Navigator through, Shamrock, there's a whole lot of people that are putting together information, and it's readily available. And so there's a lot of forecasting going on, and that's a lot of my job, is forecasting in terms of purchases for down the road, purchasing today for something that's going to arrive in 2 weeks, that'll get us through another 2 weeks, and then having to look at the forecasting that's going to take place after that, for when we start to see a second and then possibly third wave of this virus come back, once restrictions are relaxed, or once we're getting into the fall and winter months, when we not only have COVID coming back, but we've also got the seasonal flu on top of it. And so we're already making our preparations for those events to happen, because we do believe they will.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that share. That was great. And I think you actually already answered the second part of the question. So we'll pause from there, but there are more questions floating in. Thank you. This is really wonderful. And Tommy and Paul, I'm going to just hold off 1 second. I'll speak to both of those. All right. Data. We love numbers, don't we, Greg? All right. A little bit of everybody here, but Greg, give us like a brief run through of what we're looking at. And, I could just, without a doubt, I could say the smallest number here is definitely one of the most interesting, but we'll get into that later.
Well, the white shade represents the probability, right? So if we look at the percentage, 86% of the people are going to wash their hands more frequently when going out to eat, right? 66% of our customers, our patrons, the people that pay our bills, whether you're a distributor, a broker, a manufacturer, an operator, a spectator, the patrons still pay the bill. Sales still makes the wheel turn. So what this is saying is everything on this list has to do with safety and sanitation, right? 52% of people are going to maintain larger distances in between other people at restaurants, right? 59% of people are going to avoid sharing foods. What does that do to dim sum? I'm dying here, right? So what's this is saying is people are aware that how a virus is transmitted, and they're going to take precautions until they feel safe, until there's herd immunity, until there's a vaccination. So this is our world for the next 18 months to 2 years, just for like I said, until there's a vaccination out there, I'm sorry for stuttering, but that's the reality of it. So let's make some adjustments together so we can gain that dollar back, so we can still keep having that sales wheel keep turning.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, many of these data points are engineered into our practices. We have GMPs, good manufacturing practices, that we have in food service manufacturing. But how are you adjusting for education, training, and implementation through this?
Yeah, that's an ongoing question, right? So the first part, from the educating standpoint, all of our curriculum, probably much like what Chef Jeff has in his world, is an hands-on learning mode, and a pretty dialed in curriculum that everybody follows, and they get practical experience so they can gain skill. When you have to flip that and go to online learning, you can't give them a full scope of education on from a culinary skill perspective until they can get hands-on. How do you teach somebody how to make a hollandaise on a monitor and then evaluate them for the final taste, the viscosity, how does it hold up? The same thing in teaching garde manger. How do you effectively teach how to make a pâté a terrine or chauffoie a fish when you're going to do it on a screen? So some of the things that we've done in Denver to adapt there is we've gone to online. So we've gotten real proficient with Zoom, and the student body as well. And we've used a variety of different texts. So different schools text. We've used a variety of different YouTube resources that are out there already. And we're also in the process of making our own YouTube channel. So we're recording what I'm lecturing on and what the other chef is lecturing on week to week. And then the practices that we have, there's some great stuff already out there from some very notable chefs around the world. So we're using that in the first segment. When we actually get to back in the kitchen, which we'll talk about later as we go through that, then we back up and we go through the practical applications of making the terrine, making the hollandaise, making sure you've got the right the heat on the double boiler for when you're making the sauce, and you're handling the chauffoie correctly so that you don't get ripples and layers and bubbles. Mm-hmm. All of the practical stuff. From a manufacturing side, I'm really fortunate to have some great producers in different areas of the country. And one of the standards that I put in place is the SQF Food Safety Code. This was originally developed in Australia in 1994. It's been adopted around the world, and there's a component of that called the Global Food Safety Initiative, GFSI. So what this is, it's a food industry for primary production to storage and distribution, and now includes food safety for retailers. It includes site-specific processing, products certification standards, and emphasis on systematic applications for codex, HACCP principles, and the guidelines to control food safety and food quality hazards. It's a very strict evaluation to go through. So from a food manufacturing side, I look to producers for the different brands and labels that I produce, that this SQF is front and center on their production floor, and that they've passed and they've got a good updated score. It gives you good peace of mind, even though you still buy the liability insurance, because you never know. But when you have somebody that's got SQF, you automatically go, I'm dealing with a credible operation. So those are the other thing that I look at, which is what we're dialing into now. With all the different products that I'm producing, I'm looking at best practices for traceability so that you can take that all the way back to the farmer, wherever that is, whether I'm buying chili peppers in South America, or I'm buying peppercorns in Cambodia, or I'm harvesting Murray River salt in Australia. That I have a traceability documentation through that process. And then part of that is also going back to how does it impact the sustainability mindset that everyone's paying attention to, right? Is it good for the planet? Are we handling it correctly? Are we not making sure that we're part of the fair trade agreement? So if I'm harvesting coffee, that I'm not using Juan Valdez's grandchildren to do it. But I've got all of those steps in place so that I've got a peace of mind that I've got a quality ingredient going in, a quality ingredient going through production will also yield a quality ingredient coming to the customer at the end.
Excellent. Very good. Very well said too. And I think because of my manufacturing background, we could talk all day about GFSI or any of the others out there. There's umbrellas for days. But Jeff, I want to bring you in, and we are monitoring these things here, but how are we monitoring them? We would call it ongoing verification.
We got to confirm. Who was that?
You're good.
I just got. Nope. It goes back to our basics. It's calibrating your thermometers. It's going through your regular checks and changes that you're always looking to do and go and evaluate with your people. It's always that basic understanding that they need to understand their roles in the chain that we're trying to create. And you just it's constant reaffirmation. It's constant reaffirmation. That's the things that I see are the best part, the practices that we need to really focus on, especially going back to a smaller kitchen environment that I'm accustomed to. It's retraining, whether it is making sure they understand the sanitation solutions and how they have to be done the correct way, or it could be as simple as, does everybody have the thermometer on? Is everybody following the timing that we are using for our thermometers? It's the basics of that stuff.
Well said. All right. Oh, look, here we go. Ongoing verification with some red chicken scratch on there. But aside from the reminders, Greg, this one's for you. Aside from the reminders that are present for our actions, how are we informing the customers, the people that are paying for the food, the experience, even though that they're kind of reenacting the experience when they go home?
All right. Well, I would say, am I off mute? Yeah. As far as social messaging, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whether it's on your website, or whether it's through a guy flipping a sign out front, or maybe it's a message on the receipt, the communication to the customer ultimately needs to happen. So what is my restaurant doing differently to ensure your safety? Safety from food safety, bacteria, and viruses, and then COVID safety, right? So your question kind of is centered around communication. So I would say that the experience of the customer needs to look and appear as if the restaurant really cares, right? So maybe that's a tamper-free, evident label. Maybe that's a number on the label. How many people touch this product, right? And as far as social messaging goes, you can make a video. This is the best practice that I've seen. The chef, the kitchen manager, the staff, everybody makes a video. Maybe it's the same video, and it's posted out there. You have a relationship with your customers, your patrons, your camera, and you're saying, hey, everybody, this is what we're doing. We hear you. This is the name of our restaurant. This is what we're doing to ensure your safety. And again, they can go through the flow chart that you have right there on that slide. We're practicing social distancing. We have distance between team members. We take employee temperature. I saw that question in the chat, right? We're cleaning more than necessary, right? We've got standard operating procedures. We are wearing gloves. We're wearing face coverings. And then we're ensuring that you have in your package, whether it's to go or delivery, or when open, in-seat dining comes back, it is maybe it's single-use containers for some things. Maybe it's a fancy single-use container. And then there's gloves, there's alcohol wipes. And it's just about messaging that and telling the story to your customers with, I think, a video, I think photographs. I think you can throw some animation in there to hit a different target audience, because social messaging is all about who am I targeting here. So telling that story, maybe it's on your menu, but you need to tell the story. What's my packaging? What's different pre-COVID, pre the worst St. Patrick's Day ever? What are we doing different now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Excellent. Now more flowcharts, my favorite. What I want to look at this in a little bit different perspective though, and let's talk about what mom and pop is doing versus what larger chains may be doing. What is the importance to know each of those? Greg, that one's for you.
I'll kick it off, and I think we got a lot of experts on the phone.
Yeah.
I would say that if you look at the top, have a plan, train your staff, execute, and then tell everybody, tell the world what you're doing. And then I really think, and Chef Michael, you said this, being the corporate chef of 26 facilities, that's a huge responsibility. And one thing goes wrong, I'm sure you're getting a phone call and an email. So I'm sure that you have several self-audits. How many times? I used to have a 450 monthly point self-audit. So I think the self-auditing is the catch-fall that most restaurants don't have. So what I'm saying here is implement a self-audit. Maybe it's Fridays. Maybe it's before every shift. Maybe it's 10 items. Maybe it's 100 items. And then repeat. But if you look at the bottom of the flow chart, and Chef Michael, you said this as well. Deliveries come in. They are quarantined, right? And then maybe they're washed, rinsed, and sanitized. And then they're FIFO'd in the walk-in. The culinary team is going to prep everything a la minute, right? They're going to bulk prep it. They're going to put it away. And then they're going to prep it a la minute. And then the food order is placed in the packaging, and the packaging gets handed off to the front of the house. It's got a tamper-evident label. The front of house takes the baton, and they execute their sequence of service to make sure that the customer is safe from COVID, safe from any kind of bacteria or virus that could have been floating around in the restaurant. That's what those slides are really telling and talking about right there.
Excellent. So customer perception, Walt, I'm going to put this one on you, but you have experience in variety sectors of hospitality. Where are you sending people for guidance on the following topics of, consumer perception?
Yeah, there's a lot of information out, and everyone's I call it pelo a fuego, hair on fire, with looking for information, but also what's credible, what's correct, what's the right thing to follow, what's the right information to pay attention to. So locally is the Colorado Restaurant Association, and nationally, upline to that, is the NRA, the National Restaurant Association. I mean, when you look at those those two groups, there's the NRA represents 8 million restaurants, right? There's already a reopening guide in place for post-COVID reboot. And the guidelines that are in there are really in-depth, and they're really also diverse, so that regardless of what kind of operation that you have, there's some solution steps in there from the NRA. The other 2 areas or 3 areas that I go to are all under the umbrella of the USDA and the FDA. They also have key guidelines and step-by-step instructions about how to reopen, whether you're on the consumer side or you're on the industry manufacturing side. There's some great tools and steps that are high-level validations of proper ways to go about reopening and getting things moving. The other thing that I want to point out is both, or I should say all, I went back and checked. The CRA, the NRA, the USDA, and the FDA have all updated their material twice a week for the last 8 weeks of new findings. As mutations happen, as new learnings happen, there's new material out there. So it's really a great resource, and it's a validated authoritarian position to take to go to the source and get the best information you can. The last thing of that is there's a piece that I referenced in the video that I think we should pay special attention to, and that's for the folks that are going to come back into the operation, the cooks, the chefs, the dishwashers, the bartenders, the service people, the hostesses, the line people, and the production side as well, that there is going to be a lot of, we put it under training, but maybe it needs its own category. And in the sense of training, the sense of coaching is their own mental health, their own mental well-being. Basketball player Kevin Love, there's a quote in the video from his attention to that for the people. He was using it that the workers that actually take care of the court, the basketball court, that he was supporting them while they were out of work until they got picked up by the PPP, that their well-being, if they're in a good spot, if your servers, your cooks, your bartenders, your hostesses are in a good spot and in a healthy spot, they are going to translate that in a trusted, in a confident way to the customer as they come in the door, whether it's a grocery store or a restaurant, or in some cases in my other world, in the manufacturing side, you got your rep out there knowing what you do and how you do it, and the sources that we're using really tell the story. And if they're confident, that also builds trust.
Excellent. Very well. Now, this is a slide that we prepared to consider the other areas of these things. But Jeff, I'm going to call you back in on this one. You know, where are you seeing adjustments, you know, from the professional side? I mean, I think that we both go out, we do things, and then we start looking at it up and down, left and right. It's a full-on assessment, and then we forget that we're actually the consumer in those moments.
Well, one of my first trips out of the house was to Home Depot. I don't know about you guys, but I live outside of Newark, and so right in the center of where a lot of the COVID stuff is going on, and it got a huge, it was shocking how they were managing it and what they were doing. But the one thing that struck me that they had completely changed was the interface with the customer and the clientele. They've got to the point where they're doing curbside service at Home Depot, curbside service. They've got paneling up between each and every one of the people that are on a register. These are all things that can be adapted easily to food service operations, but we haven't thought much about it. I mean, Home Depot did it very quickly. They knew what their game was. They knew that people were still going to be working, going to need to access their supplies, the things that they sell. So they tooled very quickly back to it. But the one thing that I've seen as far as food service is the best flow and the best, because it really struck me when we talked about earlier in the conversation about that flow chart, was there's a bakery outside of my neighborhood that I would go to, and they started very early in this. They were buying material, they were buying their food, and they were hauled on to a little bit of their staff. I think they cut a lot of their people down, but what they did was they put very strict protocols in line right away. They had the chalk marks on the sidewalk. They had, everything was done by phone order. No, they were not even taking phone orders. They're only taking online order systems. And everybody at 15-minute intervals would come and do their pickups. And they were very, very transparent. They were putting people through the system. And if somebody came up and they said they didn't have the item, or nobody was arguing the point of it, people understood the intention of what they were doing. And it was very well received, to the point where I think that their stability and how they're going to handle this, if they can keep developing the model that they've had, adding on other items to their menu that are of really, really high value right now. Things like you could purchase milk and you can purchase bacon and butter out of their facilities, as long as you did your order in advance. They were doing vegetable boxes that you could come and pick up, much like a CSA would be. You know, these things that they have adapted to, and it was all put in line so it was touchless. You didn't have to interact with anybody. All of your purchasing was done online. Everything was lined up, and you flowed right through it. They made you walk through their, not even their lobby. They put up tenting on the outside, so you walked in, grabbed your items, and walked right out. And that was the most impressive one. That's why every week we have gone back there to get items. You know, we pay a premium. It's not a cheap bakery, but because they've gone to the lengths of doing these things and kind of making everybody feel comfortable, everybody limiting the anxiety and balancing that whole experience out with the flow really, really speaks to what I would want to do in that scenario.
Thank you for that. Appreciate the share. That's actually reminds me of a previous discussion, and we were talking about how if flour was $3, I might be willing to pay $5 in this situation.
It was a poll. I did a little polling. I was talking to another company, trying to get them to pivot a little bit to delivering more items. And one of the things that we said, I asked a bunch of my former students in and around the New York area, if you were willing to make a purchase of certain items, what would you expect the markup to be if they're going to be delivered to your door? Now, I'm unfamiliar with what's happening out in Colorado so much. I see what's on the news. The only thing that keeps coming up in Colorado for me, for the most part right now, has been the JBS. So I don't understand what's happening day to day in Walt's world, Greg's world. But here, getting food deliveries is very difficult. And people are very, very apprehensive, especially middle to upper middle class, very apprehensive to leaving their homes, going to a supermarket. So they are willing to pay a premium for those delivery items of simple things. Like people are digging for yeast and flour, the basic ingredients. So yes, people are willing to pay for a $5 bag of flour, willing to pay $7.50 for it, and they're not flinching.
Yeah.
People are buying orders from, you know, it's common here, and I don't want to say it's in front of Greg, but from the Chef's Warehouse, they're doing home delivery out here. People are making a minimum of $250 for a home delivery of items.
Right on.
Because they you know, it's a huge change for them, but they're willing to buy in. So it's been it's very interesting to see how the market has changed and what people are willing to do, how much people are willing to spend for certain items that probably are, you know, maybe considered price gouging, but in the convenience aspect of it and what people perceive as safety, it changes the game for them. Things like getting an Instacart order here, you're not going to get an Instacart order at 4 a.m. That's when you're going to get one, because they're selling out so quickly because people want to feel safe in their homes. So good delivery service, coming up with that, if you can round out your food and your takeout items using something like it makes people feel assured, makes them feel comfortable, coming up with those really good plans like we're seeing out there, it's going to change the game for some places. Small places that weren't doing great or would be kind of in the middle right now, marginal, hanging on in a normal situation, if they can retool and get them there, they make people feel safe about them, are going to do exceptionally well and ride this out. We've seen it. Trevor and I have had friends that are doing very well right now.
Yes, and just so everyone knows, we're going to keep this conversation going. We specifically set it up for 75 minutes because, well, we all like to talk and we want to share this information, and we're putting it together so that you guys will capitalize on these resources and bring your questions forward in situations. You know, there's a lot more to this. This doesn't just end at the 75-minute mark. We're going to keep it going. All right, Walt, I got one for you. Now, given your experience, where are you seeing adjustments in a flow process like this? Could it be possibly in insurance? We touch base on training quite a bit, but other than that, where else should we be seeing or looking for our necessary adjustments?
Adjustments to operation, adjustments to procurement, probably all of that, right? Well, the first and foremost on the instructor side, teaching side, is going from traditional hands-on to online formatting, and then looking around the world for resources that you can tap into to that relative subject. So like I mentioned a minute ago, you're using YouTube, you're creating your own channel, or you're using some of the material that's already out there after you review it. There's some great MasterChef culinary classes that are put out there by some very notable chefs that you can tap into for certain preparations. That's a great tool. And you can do that internationally. So you can see what a culinary team is doing in Japan or in Lisbon or in Stockholm, and get an understanding of their approach to things so that you get a good best practice out of that whole scenario. we hope to do the same thing. We put an RFP out, a request for proposal in Central Colorado, looking for a new location that would give us the capability and more flexibility with the culinary students, so that we're not just an online format, but that we can go in and out of existing restaurant operations or equipment brokers or things similar to that, so that we can reintroduce that hands-on learning back into the curriculum. And then from the manufacturing side, in summary, in a quick little, to summarize some of the challenges there were lead times on things. Because we're milling our own flour, it's really easy for me to get the flour that I need, but everybody else that I talk to is lining up to be able to get some kind of fulfillment on a flour order. I mill my own, so I have that eliminated. But other ingredients are really challenging to get. So I'm having to order almost double the timeline, double in advance of what I used to be able to guarantee a 21-day fulfillment. And the same thing applies for packaging. It applies for labeling. Printing presses are running longer days and with a lot more projects in their pipeline. And on the packaging side, I mean, there's a lot of resources out there within the United States for a variety of packaging. I was in the middle of doing a fulfillment on a pretty decent sized purchase order, and in the middle of it, the supplier for the packaging stopped making that one in the middle of what we were producing. So I had to shift gears and go from one type of packaging to a different type of packaging, clear that with a purchasing agent, and then retool the line to be able to get that product ready and still meet a timeline. There's some really unique challenges out there that don't end just when you produce the product. It also goes back for the truckers. What we thought would take to get from middle of the country to the West Coast, or an extra day to get to the East Coast, I'm almost having to double that time. I'm having to require more time of the shippers, of the freight lines to get in the queue. And I'm having to double up the orders so that it fills the truck to a higher level, and change the pallet configuration so that I can stack. People don't think of those components when you buy, I need 30 cases of that, right? Well, depending on where it's coming from. So there's a lot of different challenges that come around from the manufacturing side in today's world.
Excellent. And I just want to make a comment regarding the logistics side. There's companies that we've been talking to in Southern Kentucky that ship across the nation. They actually have some international business. And in some cases, the trucks are just sitting in parking lots waiting because the shippers do not want to pay the true cost of it. So someone will get offered $900 to drive 900 miles. If I'm not even covering my cost as a logistic company, it's hard for me to say, I'll take it, which is, the other side of it too. But absolutely, the palletizing is very important. Very, very important. But let's keep it going. And in these sequence of services, specifically for takeout and delivery, Jeff, what do we need to be cognizant, aware of, even possibly more in depth, or what are we doing to stay ahead?
It's most of our stuff comes into retooling the kitchens and the staff and the equipment they need, whether it be PPE, being sanitation equipment that are not common to them. All of these new equipment, new items that are seeing in place. We're seeing foggers used. We're seeing different UV lights getting used. I've seen even at certain markets, they're putting in sanitizing baths for you to step in. Getting all of these things in order, getting organized so that they actually getting the hands-on tools. That's been a big challenge from what I've understood. Getting a piece of equipment in that other companies are trying to use and apply to go through the sanitation processes. I mean, the basics, the sneeze guards, the gloves, these things, even though they're hard to get a hold of for the gloves and stuff, those are like, that's the base expectation, but the customers are seeing other equipment being used, and they're beginning to expect it more and more and more. And getting that equipment on hand, the logistic challenge of getting the stuff that's sold out already, we're kind of in the same place again for like we were a couple weeks ago for the basics of PPE. So I think those are going to be big challenges to overcome, and who comes through with those things and gets it manufactured through the pipeline, gets the things rolling, is going to be really, really important for us to see going forward.
Excellent. Now, I had a situation where I was ordering something to pick up, actually it was takeout, but I was working on a project and I got my sticky rice with a custard on top. It arrives, no custard, no complaints, not a big deal. There's no cost difference.
Come on, you like custard, Trevor. You liked it. You wanted the custard.
The mango itself was quite interesting to me because some people in my family are allergic to mango. So I thought, how are operations actually conveying allergens in what they're doing? All right. Going to move forward a little bit. I want to touch base on what Ruby's question was as an equipment vendor. Ruby, I'm not sure exactly what equipment you have as an equipment vendor, but I foresee this being challenging for any equipment that doesn't have that sticker, the NSF one. I don't think that it should have to have any sticker itself for what we do, partially because of what we do in manufacturing. I could build a piece of equipment behind me. Nobody cares who it came from as long as I can prove it is safe. I have to validate the processes and procedures. So now that there are a lot more questions coming in. And Tom, I think, Mr. Parker, we can definitely hit that right now, but how is back of the house going to cope with social distancing? Well, before we get into that, let's remember what we're evaluating in our hazard analysis. And Greg, are we seeing or hearing operations use chemicals outside of the packages, like possibly on the package itself?
Yeah, I saw a great picture of a guy with a chef hat. He was wearing a chef hat, and he had a spray bottle of alcohol just spraying everything. But I do believe with the best practices that is going to be widely used, that is actually practical, is going to be you take your box and you either take your product out of your box and wash, rinse, and sanitize, or wash it however you like to do, or it's a matter of just wiping that box down with some kind of a quat sanitizer, some kind of alcohol-based sanitizer, or some kind of disinfectant to make sure that the virus is killed. So yes, sanitizers are getting used in a different way. And again, reach out to the resources that are out there, whether it's Control Point, your company, Trevor, whether it's your distributor, what are the best practices out of the restaurants. It's the CDC, Center for Disease Control website. And then the CRA has a great website full of resources. So make sure you're doing it right. Read the back of the package. But I do appreciate the question. Thank you. Chemicals are important in killing viruses.
Yeah. And on that note, we'll get deeper into chemicals here, but I want to go to this question and say, I'll give it to you, Jeff. How is back of the house going to cope with social distancing?
Thankfully, for the most part, I don't know, the kitchens that I've worked in, there can be socially distant to begin with before this even started. We're talking about a group of people who only come together really for service and maybe for drinks at the end of it. But I think back of the house is going to come. It's really, the big challenge is going to be the demand of the facility that wherever you're working. How busy do they need to be to achieve the goals that you financially have to get to, but also, what's the market going to allow for them to keep them to keep the social distancing. It's going to be all about making sure the flow and the layout, just like we talked about when you going to the supermarket. You have this certain lane that you're going to stay in when you're working on the station. This is the area you're going to be. This is where we're going to put the panel up so that you can't touch this or that, so you can't interact in the way you would have. And it's going to be a challenge. It's going to take a lot of a lot of the fun out of actually cooking and working on a team. It's going to suck the life out of that to some degree. I think you're going to see a lot more stuff just like this. We're all on headsets right now. I think having a line cook on a headset, which is something we always attributed to maybe fast food or fast casual, is going to become the new standard, because you can't hear or communicate because you're going to be spaced further and further apart. So that I think is going to be coming along, but definitely the marking of territory in kitchens, who's passing, just the act of walking behind somebody is going to be changed, and people are going to kind of feel a little off guard by it. I think also we're going to be moving into the whole face mask, and we saw this in Asia after SARS. You saw people wearing masks. You saw people wearing visors, wearing like in kitchen scenarios at big hotels and things like this. And, from a person from our perspective in America, this is just completely foreign. We thought we were overdoing it, but it's going to come our way. It's going to happen. Front of the house is going to be a challenge, because we talked about this yesterday. When a customer is interacting with somebody, that smile that you can put on your face can change the whole mentality of a conversation with a customer. But now in the veil of a mask, it's going to change it. So I think, once again, falling back to the conversation we had before, if you are laying out and creating a level of expectation for your customer, and the people that are in that getting it to that food through the front of the house are following through it and committing to that level of expectation, then people are going to be willing to accept certain out of what we would consider normal scenarios. They'll be able to get into it. The steps and the changes, it's going to really vary from place to place to place, but I think everybody in a certain particular uniform, the expectation of people are going to be a certain particular style of dress, and it's noted and well known to anybody walking that they're having that expectation walking through the door, that you as a customer are going to need to have the mask on until you eat, etc. Whereas we as the wait staff will have all the things in place that you expect too. I think that's going to be the things that are going to now convert from being the happy smile to being the self-assured, I'm thinking everything makes you as a customer feel safer.
Excellent. And on that, I'm glad you had mentioned, body placement in this, because in food manufacturing, we paint the floor. But in the kitchen, where we can actually put tape, how often are you going to clean that tape? It's funny, because we actually use tape in pharmaceutical operations, where it's picking up whatever you may have tracked from one room to the next room. So that's important to make sure that that's being done as well. And we're getting into some other things. I'm going to just speak to some of these highlights, and then we're actually going to put a video up of the interviews and the guests that have joined us. So this is really fantastic. And I'm really happy to see so many people actually also watching in front of the screen, being a part of this. Very, very excited. But when you get stuck, where do you revert back to? Well, go to your foundation. Remember the fundamentals. If you think about the 5 preliminary steps of HACCP itself, you start with a team. So you get stuck, where do you go? Go to the team. Don't be afraid to say, I'm stuck, I need help. Be vocal. Now, in this particular photo, this was part of what we talked about in the beginning as far as one of our milestones. This is really important, because this was actually a scientific study that was done in the 60s by a scientist who got a bunch of actors together and said, okay, go over here, look up, and just, mind your P's and Q's, but just start talking about it as you see it. And then look, all of a sudden, this group of people started coming in and seeing the same thing. So one of the big takeaways is the value of food safety. When we're all looking at it like this, we all start to capitalize and say, okay, how are you doing this? And how are you doing this? Nobody's reinventing the wheel. Nobody's breaking trade secrets or anything. We're just utilizing what we already have to do to go forward. So it's really important. And this highlights it. What happens when we actually capitalize on this? Well, we reduce our risk. We have less operational downtime. Our team is so much more informed on what they have to do and how to do it. And then we own the industry. We'll go back to the why we were talking about. We need to own the industry, not regulators who aren't familiar with what we do. I could sit down and talk HACCP all day with regulators, but if one tells me that I must have norovirus in my hazard analysis, I could give you the science and my science, not only the science that I got from a university, but the science of data that I have generated in an operation to say, this is why I've made the decision. We have to educate our regulators. They don't get to tell us how we run our businesses, or at least they shouldn't. And we deal with this all the time. So the question is, are we trial by fire or are we lost at sea? We want to own this and make sure that we're trying what works for us. Just because somebody gives us guidance doesn't mean that it's a regulatory requirement. But go back to the common sense approach of food safety and really break it down. So we already recapped that. Now we're going to get into our video. And thank you for all these questions. I'm going to pause here just for a second before we start the video to share with you. Take a screenshot, use your phone to take a picture. But again, these slides are going to be present. We're going to put the video up as well. And then the next video that you're going to see is already on YouTube, but Control Point's going to put it up on our website. So you can just, boom, you have everything. All right.
We don't have audio.
What about now, Walt?
No.
Darn it.
A little more. A little more.
Wait.
You almost got it.
Like DeGiovanni, I'm a certified executive chef. In the past 20 years, I've been a member of the Colorado Chefs Association.
Very low and echo.
Okay.
It's because it's picking it up from your headset microphone and it's playing from the computer, I would assume.
All right, well, the trial run, the video worked well. The actual situation, it's not, that's okay. What we're going to do is I'm just going to, boom, copy this link. I'm going to throw it into our gorgeous chat, and then we're going to go straight to Q&A. So again, if you feel like you've put questions forward and you are not getting the answer that you want, we can always recircle back around. Like this is not stopping. I'm going to go up to some of our early questions that we have here.
So, Trevor, really quick, this is Greg. Rebecca, do you want to give us a high-level overview of that video real quick? I know you worked really hard on it.
Well, some of the many points were covered today in this conversation by, Walt and Michael. From Michael D's perspective, he's talking more about what they've done in the retirement home realm. From our consultant, Tom, he works with logistics, efficiencies. So he was talking about some ideas on ways to maximize your revenue streams with one product in multiple different ways in the restaurant, as a delivery item, as, selling it frozen versus fresh. Then we have Michael B., who talks about, his role as a chef supervisor at NCAR and, how they're going to have to do everything online and everything to go. And then we have Walt talking about, the educational realm versus manufacturing. So lots of good tips and contact information for all of those lovely gentlemen as in the video as well. So you can reach out to them. They're all there for support and advice.
Yes, thank you very much, Rebecca. And I know how much time it takes to edit these things. It's not my profession. So thank you for taking it on. It was a relief. It was like I had passed my SQF audit and the weight of the world just went off my shoulder when Walt said, oh, Rebecca's going to edit the videos for us. So thank you. Getting into some of the Q&A, I want to highlight some of the early questions. Tommy, this is a great one. How are you recommending that restaurants prove to consumers that they are sanitizing? Great question, because I think we talked about validation. We're proving it, but we're also showing it as well. So it's not just something that we say on paper, but we're also doing it, collecting the data, verifying it day in and day out. It's not just, we do this well. Well, that doesn't really hold much weight. Where's the science behind it? And I think the other question was how many others are screening before shift. I know a lot of food manufacturers that are food service operations, it's kind of here or there, intermittently. Timothy, thanks for coming in. It's great to see other distributors here from Shamrock. Thank you, much appreciated. See, we have Jesse's comment here. The number one message for public needs to hear first and foremost is that the staff and the crew has been properly trained in current and stricter guidelines in today's times. The rest will follow. Well said. Chef Michael answered this question, but has anyone found a way to sanitize silverware and keep it sanitized until it hits the table? It says roll your silverware in a napkin. Yeah, or keep it covered when it is not rolled in those instances. But if your SOP changed from rolling silverware to rolling silverware with gloves, how are you maintaining or monitoring that those gloves are staying clean as well? All right. And then we're going to get deeper into these questions.
I like Jesse's comment about how would small kitchens be able to deal with, or closet kitchens deal with distance the social distancing. Redesigning layout of kitchens is not cost feasible. I worked in a restaurant called Poet in Manhattan for a period of time, and it was the tiniest kitchen. With your wingspan, you could touch both walls, it seemed like. Unfortunately, I think what's going to happen is the characters of a lot of restaurants like that, because redesigning a kitchen is so high cost for a lot of people to do. It's going to we're going to go back to the basics, back to, well, building a restaurant from the ground up in many ways, and we always start with the menu. So you're going to look at your menu, and you're going to start chipping away at everything that's going to put people in harm's way in many ways. And you're going to have to redesign the menu, and the restaurant's not going to look the same, because the menu is the basis for your restaurant, and it's going to happen, and it's going to change the character of dining. But that's how those smaller places are going to survive. That's how they're going to redirect and adapt to what's going on. And if you're willing to be nimble, if you're willing to pivot, you can be successful. If you're going to tell everybody you're going to run that place like it was 1955 and you're going to keep everything the same way, you're not going to survive. It's just it's going to happen. And I hope people start to realize that. I hope people don't get pig-headed and they accept the fact that the world is still spinning and they have to move forward.
I'll chime in on that. I love that, Jeff. And actually, I've been to Poe Restaurant in Greenwich Village, and it was I had a great experience there. But it's a very, very small restaurant. You have to go downstairs. But I think when redesigning the menu, whether it's social distancing the kitchen or the equipment that you have, or the trying to find a replacement for your in-seat dining, there needs to be a new stream of revenue going in. And I know this conversation's been centered around safety and sanitation. However, what does the new stream of revenue coming in look like? Is that home meal replacement? Is that meal kits? And then what does the safety and sanitation look like around that new stream of revenue? Because restaurants aren't going to be able to make it with just their to-go and delivery business. Maybe they're doing $400 a day when they're used to doing $4,000 a day. They can't just keep hopping along. So if they're selling something else, it needs to work, it needs to make sense, it needs to fit in, and their safety and sanitation protocols need to address those new streams of revenue as well.
The build out menu options like you're talking about, where you give people everything they need to make a meal, is very reassuring, because ultimately at the end, if they're doing the way you've scoped it out for it to be done, then most of it will be safe, especially if it's a cooked item and they're putting it out themselves. And that has become the lifeblood of some places. I have a friend in Cincinnati who's retooled and done that. Places, corporations like HelloFresh, that's what they built their world on top of. They're doing out a hell of a business right now because of this. So those are going to be streams of revenue. I think that, as I said earlier, taking those market items that people are having difficulty getting, they're going to help bring in streams of revenue. Being able to buy butter, being able to buy yeast and things that people aren't going to be able to get are going to help along sales. We saw things like people actually selling toilet paper or giving a couple rolls of toilet paper as an incentive to a purchase. So if you bought a meal from them that night, a couple rolls of toilet paper, that incentivized your purchase. The people are being creative. And it's going to be very interesting what we see distill down from it. Manhattan is going to be the proving ground for a lot of it. The cost tolerances there are exorbitant per restaurant, what it takes to do things, and it's going to kind of set a mark. Some of it's almost going to be ridiculous to some degree. I think that Manhattan allows for people with a certain wealth to overspend on certain things. It's going to change the game a lot. My outlying thoughts with all of it is, it's a new frontier, and I really am very curious. I'm not saying I'm happy to see it go, because fine dining is where I want to be. Fine dining is where I was trained to be and what I really enjoyed about cooking. But it's going to be very interesting what people like myself and Walt are going to have to retool and teach our students that's going to be acceptable going forward. But also, I think on the back end of that, for Walt, I've already seen some of my students being successful doing what they're doing and changing their game and being willing to flow with it, being on social media, making people understand where they're coming from, selling their story. I mean, that's the big thing. Selling your story of what your facility, your restaurant, whatever it may be is going to go a long way. Personalizing these engagements is going to go a long way. And I'm very proud to see what some of my students have been up to in this. It's stuff that I wouldn't have thought about,
I'm going to bring in Tom, and these are questions from our chat window. But Tom, I'm asking you as a consumer. I know that you're coming from the side of processes, procedures, but you as a consumer, what would you say makes you feel comfortable if you have to go out for essentials or you're doing a pickup order, a takeout?
I guess what makes me feel comfortable, and when I'm going out and picking up things from a restaurant or what have you, is I sort of casually ask the questions of the employees or the people that I'm dealing with. How are things going? What are you guys doing to kind of make sure that you're staying safe? And just kind of seeing if the owners or the operators of the facility have taken into account the safety of the staff, and if that seems like that's an important point for them to be concerned about in terms of operating in this new era. There's a lot of people that are operating just to kind of keep the brand alive until the next iteration comes with the new regulations. And do they have the kind of the journey of the employee laid out, and is it promoting the social distance and the safety and what have you? And I've talked to some restaurant operators here in San Francisco who have the same problem as like in Manhattan, where they have a small kitchen or a galley kitchen, and there's no way to social distance, and they're like, I'm not taking the chance. It's not worth it. So I really think that the people who are doing the operating now are trying to be as conscientious as possible and keep up to speed on it. And it's just, you're also going to go to places that you trust. This isn't the time to go try the newest, coolest, joint that might be some far-flung cuisine that we don't know anything about. You're really going to try and go to places that you trust or people that trust.
Thank you for that.
I think
I'm going to jump in here
real quick, but Jeff, just because we're at
Yep,
time,
go. Yep.
Paul had a great question about how we keep people and vendors from price gouging. Paul, I think your example as far as mask, great example, but what can we do for mask ourselves? I think we can go the cloth route, but you need to make sure that we have the frequency of good sanitation. I wouldn't put them in the linen basket itself. Maybe we start doing we set it up so we can launder our own stuff. And I have lots of really awesome information to share on that, but that would require another conversation. So to be respectful of everyone's time, that is a hard stop for us, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to keep it going. Our contact information is here. I'll make sure to write a recap for all of our guests, all the chefs that joined us to get in touch with them. I just want to be respectful and don't throw out their emails and say, go ahead, send them a bunch of memes. All right, so thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll see you very soon.
And check out that video on behalf of the Colorado
Yes,
Chefs
please
Association.
do
We
that.
thank you. The video is amazing. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Walt. Thanks to the guest panelists. Thanks to the people that helped with the video. And thank you to Control Point, Trevor, Jeff, Walt, everybody on the call. We'll see you next time. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.